As I grew up, I had a deep appreciation for predictability and routine. My parents, though not affluent, cultivated a home filled with warmth, stressing the importance of diligence and fidelity. They were high school sweethearts who committed to each other at a young age, setting a powerful example of unwavering affection and steadfastness. My hope is to forge a similar connection with my future partner, grounded in mutual esteem and devotion. During my university years, I encountered Helen and was immediately captivated by her. She possessed an ambitious spirit, sharp intellect, and a vibrant personality. Our affection blossomed rapidly. I had just completed my degree in information technology and had secured employment while Helen continued her academic pursuits, ultimately earning her law doctorate. Our connection felt fated, and I wholeheartedly supported her through her law studies, confident in our shared future. Not long ago, my wife of 24 years, Helen, departed for a weekend excursion with her paramour, Ray Bland. There was no affectionate farewell or reassuring gesture, merely a dismissive pat on my head. Her detached demeanor was unnerving, and I was overcome with a profound sense of disquietude, uncertain of my next move. We exchanged vows at the age of 22, and I had just commenced my career in IT, while Helen was immersed in her legal education. I stood by her through those demanding years out of love and a belief that it would ultimately benefit us both. Upon graduation, she secured a prestigious position and built a thriving career. Although her income surpassed mine, I took immense pride in her achievements. We deferred starting a family to prioritize her career, and eventually she opted against having children altogether. We became a couple with 2 incomes and no children. I was unaware of the specific birth control method she used, and deep down I harbored resentment over her decision regarding children, yet I tried to embrace our life together. Helen consistently held the dominant role in our relationship, and I didn't object to placing her needs above my own. However, her attitude began to shift recently, and her heightened desire proved beneficial to me until the previous evening. She casually informed me of her rendezvous with Ray Bland, expressing no remorse, and stating that she required novel experiences while still desiring our continued companionship. I recognized the futility of an argument, and a chilling emptiness enveloped me. I did not offer her a goodnight kiss or bid her farewell. The following morning, feeling as though she had already passed from my life, I went to work like a phantom, dreading Helen's plans for that night. I knew I could not bear the shame of her intentions and feared the repercussions of a divorce. Feeling trapped, I concluded there was only one course of action. Someone had to cease to exist. Upon my arrival home that evening, Helen was preparing for her weekend rendezvous. While she showered and dressed, I retrieved a firearm from my briefcase and loaded it. My intention was to confront Ray when he arrived. I understood I would face incarceration, but I no longer cared. However, Ray simply honked his horn from his Maserati without approaching the house. Helen, treating me as an afterthought, patted my head as she departed, oblivious to the loaded weapon concealed beneath a sofa cushion. A guttural sound escaped me as she walked out with her overnight bag. Despite my rage, I could not bring myself to shoot her, and the notion of rushing out to fire at the car seemed ludicrous. After their departure, I contemplated our shared history, leafing through old photographs of cherished moments in Cancun, Paris, and our Caribbean cruises. None of it held any significance any longer. I lacked a support network. My family was gone, and Helen displayed no interest in my life. I made certain alterations to our joint bank account, dispatched an email to her legal firm detailing her infidelity, and left a note alongside my wedding ring on the coffee table. I sat on the couch, lost in memories of happier times, and eventually found the resolve to pick up the weapon. "I'm sorry, Mom and Dad," I murmured. "I hope to see you soon," before pulling the trigger. I was reclining in bed with Ray, and I hadn't given Terry a second thought since departing home on Friday. I was displeased that Ray had brought him up, but he was correct. Terry's nights of uninterrupted slumber were long past. Terry had always been tender and affectionate, but at times, a woman desires more excitement. "I honestly didn't think about him at all this weekend," I stated. "Put him out of your mind," Ray instructed. "Don't forget he's a few years older, so it's to be expected." "Didn't you consider what we discussed earlier?" he inquired. "You mean doing it in front of your husband?" Ray asked, raising an eyebrow skeptically. "Yes," I replied, "just to remind him how things will proceed from now on." "Don't worry. Terry's a coward. He won't do anything. He didn't even attempt to stop me when I left Friday night." "Well, kitties can transform into mountain lions when pushed too hard. Remember the Connors case?" Ray cautioned. "You said he didn't try to stop you, did he?" Ray continued. "No, he just sat on the couch. He hasn't uttered a word since I informed him Thursday night," I answered. "Did he call or text you?" Ray asked incredulously. "No, he hasn't," I replied. "Don't you find that strange?" Ray inquired. "Not really. He knows how I behave when I've made a decision," I said. "Either that, or he's already dumped you," Ray retorted sharply. "He wouldn't dare. He knows I love him and it's just sex," I countered. Ray regarded me as if to question my sanity, then softened. "If you say so, let's do it again." "Not until you promise to help me punish him when we return tomorrow night," I insisted. "All right, I'll help," Ray agreed. We pulled into my driveway late Sunday night. The house was eerily silent, and the yard had been neglected, something Terry always tended to on Saturdays. I mentally resolved to address it with him. I anticipated that with my new romantic interest, nothing else would change. "Are you ready for this?" Ray asked. "Of course," I replied. "Say it," Ray instructed. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, Ray following closely. As I inserted the key, I thought, at least Terry hasn't changed the locks. I opened the door and was assaulted by a foul odor. "What on earth is that?" I exclaimed, covering my mouth and peering inside. What I witnessed filled me with horror. I quickly shut the door and stumbled into the yard, where I vomited. "What's going on? Are you all right?" Ray asked, approaching me. "It's Terry," I stammered. "He's dead." "Dead?" Ray exclaimed, almost shouting. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. The couch is ruined, and there's a mess everywhere." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, panic rising in my voice. "Well, call emergency services," Ray replied nervously. "Thanks, Captain Hindsight," I snapped sarcastically. Ray flinched but quickly regained his composure. "I'm sorry, Ray. I didn't expect this. Will you stay until the police arrive?" I asked. "I can stay for a few minutes," Ray said reluctantly, "but this is your mess to deal with." "Thanks," I replied. I dialed the emergency number. The operator assured me that the authorities were en route and advised me to remain outside. I concurred, given the stench. We waited by Ray's Maserati, and then it struck me. Terry was dead. I hadn't wanted this. I had envisioned him caring for me in my old age. Realizing this, I burst into tears. Ray placed his arm around me. "You know you'll have to call Blado," Ray said. "It'll be in the paper, and the firm doesn't like surprises." "I know," I said quietly. "Wilson Blado is the managing partner of our firm. You should call him now before the police arrive, Ray suggested. You're right, I said, pulling myself together. As a lawyer, I need to act. I dialed Blado's home number. He answered after the third ring. Good evening, Helen. What can I do for you? Blado asked. Mr. Blado, my husband is dead. It seems he eliminated himself, I told him, my voice trembling. Well, that explains why he never responded to my email, Blado replied in his usual measured tone. An email? I asked, puzzled. Why would my boss write to Terry? Yes, he sent a disturbing email on Friday night. I saw it after dinner at the country club and replied right away. Is it true? Blado inquired. What is true, sir? I asked, now worried that you spent the weekend with Ray Bland and were physically engaged. Is that true? He repeated in his relentless tone. Yes, sir, it's true, I said, fearing for my job. The firm's morality clause could lead to my dismissal. Lying would only worsen matters. I'm sorry to hear that, Helen, and about your husband. Have you called the police yet? Blado asked. Yes, sir, I confirmed. You'll be busy for a few days. Take a week's vacation to handle your husband's passing. We'll discuss your situation and your future here when you return, Blado said. But I have the Wilson case, I protested. Jenny Hawkins is your second assistant, correct? He asked, knowing full well he had appointed her. Yes, sir, I said, feeling numb. Jenny is competent. I'll have her file a continuance to get up to speed. Focus on your husband's arrangements. I'm very disappointed in you, Helen, Blado said. I understand, sir, I said nervously. Is Mr. Bland with you now? Blado's tone was emotionless. Yes, sir, I replied. Inform him to report to my office first thing in the morning, Blado ordered sternly. Yes, sir, I'll tell him, I said. Thank you, and I'm sorry for your loss, Helen. We'll talk later. Goodbye, Blado said, ending the call. I was stunned. It felt as though he handled such calls daily. I shook myself and looked at Ray grimly. Well? Ray asked awkwardly. Blado wants to see you in the morning. Apparently Terry sent him a letter about us, I said, feeling powerless. Crap, Ray sighed. We're totally screwed, I finished his thought. Maybe, or maybe not. We have seniority, and it's the first time. Maybe they'll be lenient, I suggested. You don't really believe that, do you? Ray asked. Not really, but I hope. I'm so sorry, Helen, Ray said. Me too, Ray. I'm as much to blame. I had no idea Terry would react like this, I said. At that moment, 2 police cars and a coroner's van arrived. An officer asked Ray to move his car, and another officer requested my identification. I presented my license, and they entered the house. As they opened the door, the smell hit them, and the coroner's team began their work. Can you tell me what happened, Mrs. Baker? The officer asked. I left the house Friday afternoon. Terry was alive on the couch. I came back shortly before calling emergency services, I explained. Terry is your husband, the deceased? The officer asked. Yes, I said. And you were gone all weekend? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, I answered. And what did you do this weekend? He asked neutrally. I was with a coworker, I answered evasively, feeling my stomach twist. Is this the gentleman you were with? The officer asked. Yes, I confirmed, trying to remain detached but failing. I'd been in many interrogations, but this was different. He continued with a few more questions, which I answered briefly. After another 20 minutes, the officer finished taking my statement. I tried to appear nonchalant, but he was focused, and my face flushed as I explained my weekend. I had to admit I spent Friday night at an exclusive nightclub, and the rest of the weekend at a prestigious apartment complex, even providing my apartment number. What was I supposed to do? Plead the fifth? Demand a lawyer? He was merely taking witness statements at a potential crime scene. I was just a bystander, even if involved. "That's all for now, Mrs. Baker," he said. "I need to speak to your colleague." The officer walked off to speak with Ray, passing where I had vomited. He noted it and continued. It was evening, and curious neighbors were watching from their windows and porches. Damn it, did this have to be so public? I thought. Maybe I should have stayed with Ray longer and come back after dark. A few minutes later, technicians emerged with Terry's body on a gurney. I shuddered but couldn't look away. They placed the gurney in the van, folded their suits into a bag, and drove off. An officer with sergeant's stripes approached me, carrying 2 plastic bags. "Mrs. Baker," he said, "I'm Sergeant Smith. We found this weapon next to your husband. Did you know he had it?" he asked, showing Terry's weapon. "Yes, it was a gift from his grandfather." "He's had it for years," I replied, shivering. I wondered if Terry had acquired the weapon after I left or had it all along. Had he planned to use it on Ray or me before turning it on himself? The news stories of self-destruction I had previously ignored now seemed alarmingly real. Terry loved me, didn't he? "We found this on the coffee table," the sergeant said, holding out a bag containing a note and Terry's wedding ring. Trembling, I read the note through the plastic. It was a furious letter blaming me for his demise and our ruined marriage, filled with words he had never used before. With shaking hands, I returned the note to the sergeant. My knees were trembling, but I did not falter. If I wasn't in shock before, I was now. I realized that if Terry had spoken up on Thursday, perhaps he would still be alive, but I couldn't dwell on hypotheticals. As a lawyer, I had to deal with the reality before me. Taking deep breaths to steady myself, I asked the sergeant, "Can I go back to my house now?" "We're still examining the scene, ma'am. It's pretty bad in there. Your husband committed suicide Friday night, and I don't think you should stay here for a couple of days. I called a cleaning service, but I'd recommend finding a hotel until Tuesday or Wednesday." "Can I at least get my computer and some things for a couple of days?" I asked professionally. "When we're done," said the sergeant. "It could take another hour." He studied me for a moment, then handed me a card. "I know this is a shock. I recommend Gina Hastings, an excellent counselor we refer people to for trauma. Tell her you spoke to me. She'll get you in quickly." "Thank you, Sergeant Smith," I replied, feeling annoyed at the prospect of needing a counselor. "I'll think about it." His expression showed disapproval and concern. "Call her soon, or talk to a pastor or friend," he said, then went back inside. I sighed and sat on the porch swing Terry had installed last summer. We had only used it once since then. I couldn't stop thinking about Terry's letter. Ray joined me on the bench, keeping a distance. I noticed some neighbors still watching from their windows. "They want to know how we spent the weekend," Ray said with a sigh. "You told them everything?" I asked, stunned. "Almost just the basics," Ray replied. "What did the sergeant want?" I inquired. "Terry wrote a suicide note," I said blankly. "Blaming you?" Ray asked sarcastically. "He called me a witch and said his blood was on my hands," I replied. "You can't blame yourself. He's the one who pulled the trigger," Ray said firmly. "You're right," I whispered, "but I have to face the consequences of my decisions." Ray continued, "I think I know how to address Blado. Since I'm divorced and you're widowed, there's no risk of lawsuits. Our date was personal and not a scandal. The firm has no reason to fire us. I'll call you tomorrow after the meeting to coordinate." I looked at him, realizing too late how much Terry had done for me. Ray was focused on saving his career, while I was trying to save my sanity. "Let me know what Bledo says," I finally said. I will. Are you going to be okay? Ray asked. I'll be fine, I replied, though I doubted it. Call me if you need anything, Ray said before walking away. Yeah, okay, I mumbled. Shortly after, an unmarked van arrived. A young man with shoulder-length blonde hair approached. Is this the Baker residence? He asked. Yes, I confirmed. And you are? Jack Harrison, from Harrison Cleaning Services. I've been told there's been an incident, he replied, handing me a card. Yes, the police are still inside. Great, Jack said, putting on his mask, boots, and gloves, then went inside. A few minutes later, Jack and the police officers came out. Sergeant Smith walked over to me. We're done, Mrs. Baker. Here's my card with the case number. I'll have a report ready in a day or two. Call me if you have questions, Sergeant Smith said. Thank you. Can I get my things now? I asked. Of course, but put on a mask and booties before going inside, the sergeant said. Jack offered me some to use. Thank you, I said, taking the card and putting it in my purse. Jack handed me boots and a fresh mask. The officers left as I put on the mask and boots. Jack opened a jar of mentholatum. Put this on your nose, it's still pretty bad in there, he advised. I followed his instructions and entered the house. The ointment helped, but the foul odor persisted. I inspected the mess on the expensive sectional sofa and realized I would need to replace it. It cost over $6,000 and wasn't even 8 months old. The abstract painting above it, which cost $2,000, was ruined, splattered with Terry's blood and brain matter. The carpet in front of the couch was soaked with blood and fluids. I can clean the carpet and hopefully salvage the subfloor. Not sure about the couch, but I'll try, Jack assured me. Please do, I said quietly. How long will you be here? Most of the night. Can I call or leave a message when I leave? Yes, I said, handing him my card. Just lock up when you leave. I felt uneasy leaving him alone, but he was licensed and insured, so I took the risk. Yes, ma'am, he replied, pocketing the card. I went upstairs, packed for 3 days, grabbed my laptop bag, and quickly left the house before my stomach rebelled again. Jack was already hard at work. I told him I was leaving, and he waved as I walked out. I checked into the Holiday Inn Express nearby, hoping for a room. Luckily, one was available. I handed the clerk my ATM card, but it was declined. What? I asked, shocked. We always had enough in our joint account for 6 months' worth of bills. I used my credit card instead and went to my room, determined to find out why the ATM card failed. Logging into our joint account, I saw a low balance warning. To my horror, there was only $24 left. Terry had donated almost everything to children's charities and a local orphanage. This was likely his way of showing his displeasure about my decision not to have children. My immediate concern was covering our bills, which were paid automatically. I transferred enough from my account to cover this month's expenses, wondering if Terry had done something similar with his account. I noted to visit the bank tomorrow. Exhausted and hungry, I ate a greasy hamburger that didn't sit well with my queasy stomach. Back in my room, I showered and got ready for bed, falling asleep immediately. In my dream, I heard a male voice say, "I see you finally decided to get your lethargic rear back in the house." It sounded like Terry, but sharper and angrier. "Terry, is that you?" I asked, seeing nothing but dark fog. "Can you come out so I can see you, please?" "Sure," the voice replied. A shadowy figure emerged, horrifying me as I saw half of his head missing, bone shards falling away. I realized it was a nightmare. "No, this isn't real. You're not real. You're just a piece of that nasty hamburger I ate," I declared, trying to muster courage. His eyes flashed red and he came toward me. The smell hit me first, then his blazing eyes blinded me. A primal scream made me jump back and fall to my knees, hands over my head. Good. Okay, I repeated frantically. This is real. You're real. You better believe it, you pathetic excuse for a wife, he growled. Terry, I started, but he held up a hand to silence me. Shut up, witch. This is on your conscience. What do you think? He asked, turning his head to show the exit wound. Not much different than that $2,000 piece of crap painting you insisted on. I thought you liked that painting, I objected weakly. I hated it, but it made you happy. I figured you'd get sick of it just like you got bored with me. Was being with Ray worth it? I looked down, embarrassed but silent. The truth was, it had been the best fun I'd had in a long time. Your thoughts are clear here, Helen, Terry growled. I read your note, I stammered, changing the subject. Why didn't you tell me all this on Thursday? Would it have mattered? He asked grudgingly. I guess not. We'll never know now, I spat back, hating to be defensive. I think we both know the answer, Terry snorted. What did you do with our money? I asked, trying to change the subject again. My anger began to rise. Bills still need to be paid. You're smart. You'll figure it out, Terry replied dismissively. I know you gave it to children's charities. Why? I asked, anger building. You denied me children, so I wanted other kids to benefit. At least the money went to a good use, Terry explained. But what about me? You know how I feel about having kids, I protested. Yes, you made it clear you didn't want to be burdened with a career and a baby. You got your way, just like with Ray. How's that working out? Terry retorted. I'm still alive. I didn't choose the coward's way, I hissed. Cowardly way out? You think it was easy to blow my head off? Watching you leave for Ray was the hardest thing. I told you it was just one weekend. I told you I loved you. You knew I'd come back, I said desperately. You patted me on the head like a dog. You thought I'd be your willing, betrayed man. I don't remember that, but I'm sure I meant love, I protested. Terry chuckled darkly. You expect me to believe that after that weekend? Do you think I'd want to touch you again, knowing what you did? I'd rather die than be your betrayed man. How do you know that? I asked. Your thoughts are transparent here. Look, he said, pointing. A swirling mist appeared, turning into a large disk. An image of Ray and me appeared. I realized in horror what Terry had seen. I cried out in fear and tried to deny it, but I knew it was true. The next revelation was worse. I was the star of this show. That didn't happen, I protested. No, but you and Ray talked about it, Terry said. You might as well have done it. What excuse were you going to give me? That it was a one-time thing? I looked at Terry, shocked. How could he know? Yes, Ray and I discussed it, but we hadn't made plans. But none of that happened, I insisted. It doesn't matter here. Thinking and talking about it is the same as doing it, Terry replied. And what is this place, heaven? I asked sarcastically. No, it's a meeting place between your reality and mine, Terry explained. A red light began to shine through the fog. What was that? I asked. Our time is up. I have to go back, Terry said. We'll talk again. Wait. Why did you leave $24 in the account? I pleaded. You're smart. Figure it out, Terry hissed. See ya, he added, turning away. I woke up drenched in sweat. It was 8:30 in the morning. I'd fallen asleep but felt like I'd run a marathon. Exhausted, I went to the bathroom, then looked in the mirror. Dark bags under my eyes made me look 10 years older. I remembered Terry saying I looked 10 years younger. Inside, I had a full day ahead, so I showered, dressed, and went downstairs for breakfast and coffee. I picked up the morning paper, curious about any reports on Terry's suicide. There was a small notice about Terry shooting himself, but my name wasn't mentioned, which was a relief. I finished breakfast and walked to my car. My phone rang. It was Ray. "Hey, Ray, how did it go?" I asked. "About as expected," Ray replied. "I'm on administrative leave while they investigate. Things don't look good." "When will you know?" I inquired. "Within 2 weeks, but I'm not waiting around." "How are you holding up?" Ray asked. "I'll be fine," I said, not mentioning my nightmare. Then I asked, "Does anyone else in the office know?" "Anyone with an internal email?" Ray asked. "Looks like your husband told everyone," Ray said. "Crap," I sighed. "Do you want to meet for lunch?" "I have a lot to do today. Besides, it wouldn't be wise under the circumstances," Ray replied. "You're right. Call me if you need anything," Ray said. We ended the call. I checked my messages. Jack had left the house at 5:30 a.m. A communication arrived from my sister Janice. "I saw the news. Is that your Terry who took his own life?" she'd messaged. "Yes," I replied. "I'll call you later." Janice, 2 years my senior, often assumed a maternal role. I wasn't inclined to engage in a dispute with her. I drove to the house and parked in the garage. Inside, the scent of Terry's blood had vanished, replaced by the sharp aroma of cleaning supplies. I consciously avoided deep breaths, trying to prevent my lungs from drying out. As I entered the living room, I was taken aback by the appearance of the couch. It looked virtually new. This was fortunate, as it meant I wouldn't have to replace the $6,000 piece of furniture I had vowed never to sit on again. For a fleeting moment, I felt a surge of resentment towards Terry for not choosing his own chair. I noticed the painting above the couch had also been spared thanks to Jack. Content with Jack's work, I ascended the stairs to our home office. There, I collected the files containing Terry's banking details, our wills, and the mortgage insurance policy, placing them into my briefcase. The house felt unnervingly silent without Terry. I could discern the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock, and for an instant I thought I detected a putrid odor. A shiver traced its way down my spine, but I dismissed the unease and returned to my tasks. I realized the necessity of informing Terry's workplace about his self-inflicted demise. The answering machine held several messages from his office, inquiring about his absence. I returned the call and spoke with Allison Jones, his supervisor. "Helen, is everything all right? We've tried reaching you several times. Is Terry okay?" Allison inquired anxiously. "No, Allison, he's passed away," I responded, striving for a measured tone. "Oh my goodness, what happened? Did he have a heart attack?" "No, he shot himself," I stated, surprised by my own composure. "Oh no," Allison sighed. "When did it occur?" "Friday night. I was away for the weekend," I explained, hoping to curtail further questions. "I'm so sorry, Helen. Please let us know about the memorial service. Everyone here will want to attend," Allison offered. "I'll have HR contact you regarding insurance and his 401k. Call if you need anything." "Thank you, Allison. I appreciate it," I said. We concluded the conversation, and I felt a sense of relief. It had gone more smoothly than anticipated. Terry's employer provided life insurance coverage equivalent to 2.5 times an employee's salary, which could amount to $250,000. I harbored a hope that there wasn't a clause excluding self-inflicted death, and I knew his 401k would be a valuable resource. I hung up the phone and became acutely aware of the house's eerie stillness. We had resided here for over 20 years, experiencing mostly happy times. Now, the house felt like a mausoleum. Terry's memories were pervasive, though thankfully not his spirit. A chill ran through me, and I had the distinct impression of being watched, but I reassured myself that I was alone. I opened the windows to air out the chemical odor and promptly departed the house, heading for the bank. At the bank, I approached the teller and requested Terry's account balance. We had mutual access to each other's accounts for emergencies. The teller frowned at his computer screen and then went to fetch Arnold Johnson, the bank manager who invited me into his office. "Mrs. Baker, it's good you came in. I was planning to contact you later," Arnold stated. "Oh, why?" I inquired, a mix of curiosity and concern evident in my voice. "Our system flagged numerous transactions over the weekend from 2 of your accounts. I wanted to ensure you were aware," Arnold explained. "I know my husband made several charitable donations on Friday without consulting me. I hope they can be halted and reversed before they become public. I also wish to review his account activity," I added. Arnold raised his eyebrows and glanced at the monitor before responding. "I'm afraid that's not feasible, Mrs. Baker. The donations were processed just before the deadline on Friday, so most of them have already gone through." "I need that money," I pleaded. "Is there any way to retrieve it?" "You could contact them and explain the situation. They might return the funds, but there's no guarantee," Arnold said apologetically. "I can provide you with a printout of all the recipients. It's an extensive list." A simple appeal was unlikely to succeed, and pursuing legal action against all those charities would incur more in legal fees and further damage my reputation. I could already envision the headlines, "Greedy lawyer sues charities." "At least you'll have a substantial tax deduction," Arnold offered, attempting to lighten the mood. I stared at him, perplexed by his attempt at humor. After a few awkward moments, he cleared his throat and looked away. "What about Terry's account?" I asked, shifting the subject. Arnold consulted his computer. "He has sufficient funds to keep the account active. There was considerable activity on Friday. He paid off and canceled his credit card and made a significant payment to the West Side Funeral Home and Crematory." This revelation struck me profoundly. Terry had meticulously planned his self-destruction. "What about our other accounts?" I inquired. "He didn't touch them. Your joint savings and certificates of deposit remain intact," Arnold assured me. "Good," I replied, feeling a wave of relief. "I also need to apply for insurance on our mortgage." I handed him the necessary documents. "Everything appears to be in order," Arnold stated, producing a form. "Please complete this and return it with a copy of the death certificate. The sooner, the better. I will notify the home loan department." "Thank you, Arnold," I said, tucking the form into my briefcase. "It's my pleasure, Mrs. Baker. My condolences. If you require anything further, please do not hesitate to call," Arnold said, extending his hand. Despite his professional demeanor, I felt judged. I thanked him and departed the bank, feeling marginally better. I made a stop at the store for a snack and then proceeded to the West Side Funeral Home. A slender young man in a white shirt and tie greeted me. "Welcome to West Side Funeral Home. I'm Alan Markham. How may I assist you?" "I'm here about my husband, Terry Baker," I stated. "Baker, that name is familiar. Please come into my office," Alan said. He offered me coffee and sat down at his computer. "Yes, I see him here. I attempted to contact him today. He's deceased," I said quietly. "I understand," Alan replied. "When did this happen?" "Friday," I responded, providing minimal details. "He ordered and prepaid for a basic cremation service on Friday. It's unusual for clients to pay so far in advance of needing our services. Was he terminally ill?" "No," I replied. Alan looked at the screen. Then we will need to make final arrangements. Do you have his death certificate? Not yet. His body was taken to the coroner on Sunday night. I will obtain the certificate once the coroner has completed their examination. When they release his body and you receive the certificate, please let us know, and we will proceed, Mrs. Baker, Alan informed me. We spent the next hour discussing the arrangements. Terry had not been a regular churchgoer, but he had been raised Methodist or Lutheran. I opted for a simple cremation without a memorial service. Alan inquired if I wished to retain Terry's remains, but the thought sent a shiver down my spine. No problem. Mr. Baker prepaid for his remains to be interred in the columbarium, unless you wish to take them, Alan stated. I departed the funeral home feeling dejected and in need of someone to talk to. I called my sister Janice, who worked part-time at the county library. "Hey, sis," Janice answered. "I was wondering when you'd call." "I've been busy," I said. I didn't realize there would be so many details. "Can I stop by? I really need to talk." "Of course," Janice replied in her characteristic motherly tone. "Richard is still at the hospital and won't be home until late, so we have time." "Thanks, sis. I'll be there in a few minutes." We hung up, and I drove to her house. We had always gotten along well, and I knew I could confide anything in her. She greeted me at the door with a cheerful smile. "Would you like to talk over a cup of tea?" she asked kindly. "Sure," I replied. Janice went to the kitchen, and I sat at the dining table, fidgeting. She returned with 2 cups of hot tea. After adding sugar, I began recounting my weekend with Ray. Janice listened intently, her expression neutral, as I recounted everything except for my intention to have Ray entertain me in front of Terry during the nightmare. "And here, I thought you were smarter than that," Janice said quietly when I finished. "You've become a highly successful lawyer, married a man who supported you. Was your weekend worth it?" Her tone was flat, almost a slap in the face. "It was supposed to be a brief interlude," I protested. "I told Terry it didn't mean anything. It was just sex, something I needed before I got too old, just one weekend." "He chose the coward's way out," I scoffed, staring into my cup and realizing I had misled her. I had intended for more weekends, but Terry was unaware, and she didn't need to know. "Sex, huh? And you expected him to welcome you back as if nothing had happened? Come on, sis, you can't be that naive," Janice said, her motherly tone persistent. I felt indignant. I was an attractive woman, and I wanted validation that my actions were justified. I glanced at her and detected unease in her eyes, as if she could read my thoughts. Then her tone sharpened. "If Terry came home and said he was going away for the weekend with another woman, would you welcome him back with open arms?" I hadn't anticipated this from my sister. Terry would never cheat on me. He wasn't that kind of person. And if he did, I'd destroy him in the divorce. I retorted instinctively, realizing as I spoke how it sounded. I had just admitted to being the kind of person who would do that. Janice didn't flinch, knowing me too well to be surprised. "I see, so you can have affairs, but he can't?" Janice inquired, her voice still motherly. "Of course not," I protested, feeling unsteady. He had no reason to seek variety when he had me. I was the one who needed it, who deserved it. Realizing I had divulged too much, I quickly added, "Besides, it was only once." "Or would you have gone further, made Terry watch, or brought other men home?" Janice pressed, her calm, traditional demeanor making her questions all the more disorienting. "What do you think? I don't know about these things just because I work part-time at the library." "Did you do anything like that with Richard?" I asked, shocked. Of course not. I love and respect Richard too much, but I know others who have. It was clear she believed I no longer respected Terry. And what did their husbands do? Most divorced their wives. Some went further, exposing their wives to family and friends, emptying accounts. You still haven't answered my question. Was your fling with Ray worth jeopardizing 24 years of marriage? It suddenly dawned on me. The $24 Terry had left in our joint account represented $1 for each year of our marriage. Janice noticed the shift in my expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Terry donated all but $24 from our joint account to children's charities," I mumbled. "Really?" Janice giggled. "That's not funny. That account had 6 months' worth of bills," I exclaimed. "But you have to give him credit for style," Janice commented, chuckling. "What do you mean?" I asked, growing angrier. "You denied him children, so he gave your money to children's charities, knowing you didn't want kids." "I just never wanted any of my own," I objected sharply. "Helen, I've seen how you act around our children. It's obvious you don't like them." "I just didn't want any of my own. It's my body," I continued smugly, and Terry respected that. "But I'm sure you told him that after the wedding," she sighed. "I wish you'd respected him as much." "I respected and loved him," I protested, but it sounded weak. "Really? I'd hate to see what you'd do if you didn't love him. And you're so stoic about his self-destruction." This struck a nerve. What was I supposed to do? I'm left alone with responsibilities. I have to move on. If I break down, it won't change anything. "No, but it might help you process his passing. You didn't even cry when Dad died." A long pause followed. Janice looked me directly in the eye. "You're either holding it all in and are a potential time bomb, a functional psychopath, or deeply numb. Sooner or later, it will surface." "Emotions have never been my strong suit," I replied softly, pushing away the discomfort. "Yeah, I know. So what now?" Janice asked. "I have no choice but to move on," I said bitterly. "No, you don't. But Richard and I will be here for you. We may not approve of your choices, but you're family." "Thank you, Janice. I appreciate it," I said, feeling grateful. We spent the next hour engaging in pleasantries which helped to alleviate my anxiety. "Richard's on his way home," Janice announced, glancing at a text message. "Would you like to stay for dinner? It'll just be leftovers." "Your leftovers are always delicious," I said. "I'd love to stay." We had a pleasant dinner, pointedly avoiding the unspoken issue, which suited me fine. Richard was more reserved, but showed a degree of empathy upon his arrival. He nodded at me and exchanged brief, subtle gestures with Janice. Deep marital communication. I looked away, wondering when Terry and I had lost that connection. Dinner consisted of lasagna, and Janice, accustomed to cooking for a large family, had prepared more than enough. She also served her homemade apple pie, which I always adored, so I accepted a generous slice. We concluded the meal with a small glass of wine and light conversation. Realizing it was time to depart, I thanked Janice and headed for the door. Janice stopped me, placing an arm around my shoulders. "We really love you, Helen," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "Thank you. I love you too. If you need anything, just call," I whispered back, surprised. "Richard," he added quietly. "Thanks," I told him. We exchanged goodbyes and I drove back to my hotel. Once in my room, I turned on the television for background noise, changed into my nightgown, and lay down. My eyes were on the screen, but my mind replayed my conversation with Janice. Was I truly as indifferent and selfish as she suggested? "Yes," Terry's voice answered, startling me. He was leaning against the wall, looking down at me. How? Why are you here? I asked, bewildered. You fell asleep, he chuckled. Are you going to haunt me in every dream? I asked, a cold dread settling in my stomach. That's the plan, he replied with a crooked smile, his exposed skull lending him an eerie appearance. So you really think I'm an uncaring, emotionless, selfish witch? I asked boldly. Yes, Terry replied, unembarrassed. Your actions prove it. Look, he nodded toward the television. To my astonishment, it displayed scenes from my life. Tears welled up as I watched our wedding, seeing us young, vibrant, and full of love. As the movie progressed, I witnessed the changes in me. Terry was consistently supportive, working diligently so I could complete my education. We saved money, often subsisting on cheap meals, but we were content. After graduation, I secured a position and things began to shift. We bought a house and lived frugally until my career took off. I started to view children as an impediment. I watched as I disregarded Terry's efforts, dismissed his concerns, and ignored his dreams. I never wanted to get pregnant, but I kept it from Terry, using my career as an excuse. You should have been honest from the beginning that you didn't want children, Terry stated emotionlessly, sending goosebumps down my spine. You knew I wanted children, he growled as we watched the movie. I'm sorry, I stammered. As our married life unfolded, I observed a wall growing between us brick by brick. Terry consistently supported me, prioritizing my desires. I, on the other hand, lost respect for him when I began earning more than he did. It mattered little that we lived more comfortably on both salaries. I viewed everything as mine. I was clearly the dominant partner in our marriage. Terry resented it, but silently acquiesced, committed to our union. On our 12th anniversary, he realized he could live a decent life independently, but was unwilling to admit defeat through divorce. Meanwhile, I reveled in my dominance, which led me to pursue Ray. By the time the affair began, I had no respect left for Terry. Yes, that's right, Terry grumbled. I realized this was a belated response to my apology. Where was this Terry when I needed him? Perhaps if he had been rude before I left last Friday, I wouldn't have done what I did. Had it truly been only 3 days, it felt much longer. The alarm clock began to beep. I rolled over and turned it off, glancing at the wall where Terry had been. He was gone. Was it merely a dream? Was Terry correct? Would he haunt me forever? I got out of bed, showered, and brushed my teeth. The reflection of the elderly woman in the mirror didn't resemble me. I felt and looked dreadful. Despite spending the night in bed, I felt utterly drained. I packed, had breakfast, and checked out. The house smelled better than yesterday, but still felt like a crypt. The bedroom was frigid, and passing the couch felt akin to walking past an open freezer. The thought of sitting on it made me shudder. I had no idea what Terry would do next. Would he only haunt my dreams? I paced the room, taking inventory of Terry's belongings. Then I realized I needed to speak with Jerry Smith, a certified estate planner at our firm. He would likely be upset. I had informed the bank of Terry's passing, but I wasn't overly concerned. I wondered when you'd call, he said, answering the phone. I maintained a business-like tone, explaining what I had done, and he assured me everything would be handled. This was a perk of working at a law firm and would alleviate a significant burden. Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate it, I said, attempting to sound sincere despite my exhaustion. No problem. It's what I'm paid for. Can you gather all your financial documents and bring them to me this afternoon? Jerry asked. Yes, I'll be there at 3, I replied. Works for me, Jerry stated. I spent the morning gathering the necessary items, including a copy of Terry's will. An eerie sensation pervaded the atmosphere as occasional cold gusts blew, despite closed doors and windows. I heard creaking sounds as if someone were walking upstairs, but I attributed it to nerves and continued packing. A hot shower calmed me, and I changed into something less casual than jeans, but more refined than my usual business attire. At the office, everyone looked at me with cheerful expressions, then quickly averted their gaze. It was evident they were aware of my weekend escapade. My cheeks flushed as I hurried past. "Going casual these days, Helen?" Wilson asked from behind me. I turned to see him smiling, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "I came to see Jerry about Terry's arrangements," I said defensively. "It's the most sensible thing you've done since Friday," he replied evenly. "When you're done, come to my office for a few minutes." "Sure," I said, nervous about my career. Wilson, the managing partner, was an old-fashioned gentleman, but I recognized an order when I received one. I finally reached Jerry's office. He waved me in with a forced smile, offered coffee, and I handed him my documents. We discussed everything while he reviewed them. "Everything seems in order," Jerry stated. "I'll take care of it." "Is there anything else I need to amend my will and trust?" I asked. "That makes sense," he replied, pulling out my folder. "Your husband is listed as a beneficiary, executor, and medical power of attorney. I'd like my sister, Janice Hopkins, to replace him and give her power of attorney just in case." "Very well. Just write it in pencil and initial it. I'll make the changes within a day or so," Jerry instructed. "Thanks, Jerry," I said, concluding our meeting. I walked to Wilson's office, noting the secretary's disapproving glance as if I were a nuisance. "Helen, come in, have a seat," Wilson said with a pleasant smile. "How are you holding up?" "It's been a challenge," I replied cautiously. "You don't look like you've slept well," Wilson remarked with concern. "It wasn't easy," I admitted, hesitant to mention my dreams. Wilson nodded and continued. "You're probably wondering why I asked to meet." Wilson began. "The senior partners are unhappy. Your husband sent emails to everyone in the firm, and it's likely this information has leaked. Your personal and professional credibility has taken a hit. The only reason you haven't been fired is your exemplary 20-year record here." I pondered his words and what he left unsaid. His gaze prompted a decision. "Perhaps I should tender my resignation," I said quietly, a knot forming in my stomach. Wilson feigned consideration before nodding. "As much as I'd like to keep you, Helen, I believe it's for the best, given your service and record. The partners will agree to keep you on the payroll until the end of the month. This will give you time to handle your husband's affairs. We'll also put together a reasonable severance package. You're smart and driven. You'll get back on your feet." "Thank you, Mr. Wilson," I said quietly. It felt surreal. "You might consider a change of scenery. Have you ever been to Boise?" he asked. "In Idaho? No. Why?" I replied, puzzled. "A high school buddy of mine manages a firm there and needs someone with your experience. I can give him your name," he offered. "Sure," I replied hesitantly. "Great, I'll let him know. Here's his card," Wilson said, handing me a card. I glanced at it and put it in my purse. "May I ask about Ray? What's going to happen to him?" I inquired. Wilson looked thoughtful for a moment before answering. "I can't go into details, but let's just say Mr. Bland has exhausted any goodwill. You're not the first associate whose marriage he's ruined. That's why he was transferred here after his divorce. His ex-wife caught him with an alleged paramour. The lawsuit required us to keep him employed and pay generous alimony. I didn't know that, I said quietly, stunned. I knew his reputation, which is why I chose him for my affair, but not all of this. Well, I have a meeting. I'm sorry for your loss, Helen, and I'm sure I'll see you again before you leave, Wilson said, standing to signal the end of the meeting. I'll be back. I still have some papers to sign. Thank you for everything, I added, shaking his hand and fighting back tears. I hurried out of the office, avoiding others who were likely watching. Once in my car, I burst into tears. I loved this job and the people I worked with, and I had been here for over 2 decades. The thought of moving to Boise felt like exile. Eventually, I calmed down enough to drive, though it was difficult with blurred vision from crying. I nearly caused a few accidents. I finally made it home and sat on the couch, burying my face in my hands and sobbing uncontrollably over the loss of my job. I cried until I heard a sharp knock in the living room. Surprised, I saw a framed wedding photo lying face down on the nightstand, its glass shattered. Goosebumps ran through me as I realized I was crying, more over my job than Terry. Frightened, I threw the photo onto the couch and looked around to see if anything else had moved. I couldn't explain how the picture had fallen with such force. Then it hit me. It had to be Terry. I transitioned from fear to anger, from horror to rage. "Leave me alone," I screamed into the empty room. "You're dead. Go away. Stop messing with me, damn it." Suddenly the temperature dropped and the room darkened. I half expected to see objects flying off the walls and thought I heard maniacal laughter from the stairs. There was no way I could remain in the house alone. I grabbed my phone and called Janice in a panic. "Hey, sis, what's up?" she answered cheerfully. "Not great. Can I spend the night with you guys? Please?" I pleaded, my voice shaking. Her tone instantly shifted to concern. "Of course. We'll get the guest room ready. Is everything okay?" she asked. "No, it's not. I'll explain when I get there. Thank you," I said. I ran upstairs to pack my overnight bag, throwing things in hastily. I had to leave before Terry did something else. I clutched the banister tightly as I descended the stairs, sure Terry would push me if I wasn't careful. I rushed to the garage, threw my belongings in the car, and drove away, leaving skid marks on the pavement. Janice met me at the door, and I collapsed into her arms, sobbing. She comforted me and got me to sit on the couch, calming me enough to speak. "Good God, sis, what happened? Did someone break in?" she asked, alarmed. "It's much worse. It's Terry," I replied. "Terry? He's dead." "What can he do?" Janice asked, looking at me strangely. I recounted the events of the past 2 nights and what had happened at the house. She listened silently as I babbled. "He's trying to drive me crazy. I know he is," I sobbed. "Honey, you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you just need to relax and get a good night's sleep," Janice suggested. "No, you don't understand. His suicide note said he hoped I'd see his face every time I closed my eyes, and I have. I haven't slept properly since Sunday, and I quit my job to avoid getting fired," I sobbed again. "Oh, no." "What about the house and bills?" she asked, concerned. "I have the money, and the insurance will cover the mortgage. I'm working until the end of the month, and I've been promised severance pay. But I can't stay in that place. Terry hates me. He'll liquidate me if I stay," I explained, my voice shaking. "Come on, sis, that's extreme. How can a dead person hurt you?" Janice asked, trying to reason with me. "But you weren't there," I protested. "No, I wasn't. Let me take your things upstairs. Then I'll make you some tea and a grilled cheese sandwich. That should help you calm down, and then we can talk, okay?" Janice offered. "Okay," I said, feeling like a frightened schoolgirl. Janice carried my things upstairs and made tea and grilled cheese sandwiches. She brought them on a tray to the living room and sat with me. The tea flavored with honey, and the sandwich brought back childhood memories and helped me relax. "Feeling better?" Janice asked soothingly. "Yes, much," I replied with a sigh. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Have you told anyone else about seeing Terry?" she inquired. "No, are you kidding?" "I'd be institutionalized," I said, half joking. "Not necessarily. You've been through a lot. Seeing Terry must have been a shock. Maybe you should take a few days off. I can talk to Richard about letting you stay at the lake house. A few days in the country might do you good," Janice suggested. "You may be right. Wilson also suggested I get away. He mentioned Boise." "Boise? What's in Boise?" Janice asked, surprised and amused. "A friend of his manages a law firm there and needs a good lawyer," I replied. "Are you going to call him?" Janice asked. "I suppose I should, but I'd hate to leave here. You and Richard are my only family right now." I took another sip of tea. "By the way, I changed my will and trust. You're now my sole beneficiary and executor. I've also given you power of attorney." "I hope you don't mind," Janice said. "No, of course not, but you're young. You'll be around for a long time." "I hope so. Still, I like to be prepared," I replied. We ate and drank in silence for a couple of minutes. "I really messed up, didn't I?" I whispered. "You haven't been helping your case lately," Janice admitted diplomatically. "I guess I wanted to have my cake and eat it too," I said ruefully. "And look what it cost you," Janice said quietly. I already knew what my actions had cost me: my husband of 24 years, my career, and my peace of mind, all because I wanted a fling with Ray Bland. "Yeah," I sighed, "but it's too late to cry over spilled milk, like Mom used to say." "You need to pull yourself together, sis. You're right. Maybe I'll take you up on your offer and get my mind right again. Right now, I just need sleep." I yawned deeply. The tea had done its job, and I felt my eyelids growing heavy. "Let me get you upstairs," Janice said. She helped me up and led me to the guest room. I barely managed to slip into my nightgown before collapsing under the covers. "Thank you," I mumbled, "for everything." "You're welcome. Now get some sleep," Janice said, kissing my forehead. She closed the door as she left, and I drifted off. "So, you thought you could get away from me by running to your sister's house?" Terry's sarcastic voice woke me. The room was filled with a thick gray mist, and Terry stepped out of the closet, skull fragments clinging to him. "Why are you here? Why can't you leave me alone?" I asked desperately. "Leave you alone? Ha! I'll never leave you alone, witch," Terry growled, his disfigured face contorted in anger. "You were the one in the house, weren't you?" I asked. "Yes, it took effort, but now I know I can do it," Terry grinned. "Please, can't you just leave me alone? You're dead. You have to move on," I pleaded. "Yes, I'm dead, but whose fault is that? You pulled the trigger," he retorted. "Yeah, I pulled the trigger. It was either me or your boyfriend," Terry snapped back. "You were going to destroy Ray," I said. "I considered it seriously, but it would have been too quick. It wasn't supposed to be like that," he said, his eyes flashing crimson. "How was it supposed to be?" he shouted. "To go along with your affairs, leave divorce papers behind, and let your law firm ruin me publicly? Or maybe burn the house down and spend years in prison?" I had no options left, so I chose the only one that gave me some self-respect and revenge. I pulled the trigger because it was my only choice. Now my blood is on your hands. "Look," I saw my hands covered in dark red blood, dripping onto Janice's bedspread. "You may not see it in daylight, but it's still there, and nothing can remove it," Terry added. He staggered back, more pieces of his shattered head falling, but disappearing before hitting the floor. In an ethereal whisper, he added, "I have unfinished business. I can't move on until it's completed. By the way, was your fling with Ray worth it? You lost me and your job." Terry continued, "I know how much that job meant to you." "Look, Terry, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done it. Please go away," I protested weakly. "I don't think you get it," Terry replied, his tone softening. "You shouldn't have even thought about it. But you still think it's all about you, and as for leaving you alone, that's not going to happen. Ever. Please, Terry, I'm begging you. I can't take it anymore," I cried, tears streaming down my face. "You know the saying, in one hand is desire, in the other is crap. Let's see which fills up first. I wanted a faithful wife who loved me as much as I loved her. How did that turn out? Enjoy the rest of your pathetic life, witch," Terry muttered, then burst into laughter. He disappeared into the closet, and the fog drifted away. The blood on my hands and Janice's bedspread vanished. I collapsed onto the pillow, crying. The next moment, I saw sunlight through the window. I smelled bacon from downstairs and checked the bedspread. No trace of blood. I performed my morning routine, got dressed, and went downstairs. I didn't feel much better, but at least not worse. "Good morning," Richard said cheerfully, holding his morning coffee. "Janice is almost done with breakfast. Have some coffee and sit down." "Thanks, I guess I will," I said. I greeted Janice, who was placing bacon on a plate, grabbed my coffee, and sat down. "How did you sleep?" Richard asked, his eyes eyeing my haggard face. "Not well," I admitted. "Did you see him again?" Janice asked, placing bacon and scrambled eggs on the table. I glanced at her, then at Richard, who looked concerned but not shocked. I realized Janice had shared my secrets with him, but I accepted it. They were a real couple. "Yeah," I replied. "Am I going crazy?" I asked. "I'm a surgeon, not a psychiatrist," Richard replied with a slight smile. "But from what Janice told me, you're under a lot of psychological trauma and stress from Terry and your work." "You're probably right," I said, not wanting to list my woes. "But you might want to talk to our staff psychiatrist at the hospital. She's very good and might help you." "I might agree," I said. We ate scrambled eggs and bacon. Janice was the best cook since our mother, and her eggs were delicious. "We also talked about you spending some time at the lake house. We don't mind if you stay there for a few days to calm down," Richard said. "That would be nice," I said. I knew the medical examiner wouldn't release Terry's body until the end of the week, and I had 3 weeks before I was officially dismissed. Maybe a few days at the lake would help. "Good. I'll give you the key before I leave." "Can you handle driving?" Richard asked. "I can handle it," I replied with a smile. We finished breakfast, and I helped Janice clear the table. Richard handed me the cabin key from his pocket. I had been there many times and knew the way. "Have a nice vacation," Richard said. "Thank you both for everything," I said, hugging them. "My pleasure," Janice said. "Call if you need anything." I packed up and left, deciding against returning home for more belongings. After yesterday, I didn't want to be there again. I stopped at Walmart for supplies and hit the road, driving down a 2-lane highway with the windows down and the radio on. I felt the wind fluttering my hair. I anticipated a few days of peace. I was half an hour from the lake when it happened. "Nice day for a drive, isn't it?" I heard from the passenger seat. Stunned, I saw Terry sitting there looking out the window with sunlight shining through the exit wound in his head. "What are you doing here?" I almost shouted. "You fell asleep at the wheel. Not very safe," Terry said. "Watch the road." Before the intersection, my world shattered as a huge 18-wheeler slammed into my door. The impact sent the car spinning, and I was hit again by another truck. My car ended up in a ditch, upside down, airbags deployed. "I'll see you later," Terry said before I passed out. 25 years later, "Hello, Mrs. Hopkins," the cheerful receptionist said as Janice signed in. "Hello, Amy," Janice replied. "How is Miss Baker today?" she asked. "April Callahan, the head nurse. It's the same. She just sits in her wheelchair watching TV or looking out the window. Nights are hardest for her. She insists she sees her dead husband in her dreams," April said sadly. Janice knew this, but also knew Helen had come to terms with it. Terry's nightly visits no longer horrified her as much as they used to. "It's true. Something strange happened the other day," April said as they walked to Helen's room. "What exactly?" asked Janice. "If I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't believe it," April began. "You know the picture of her and her husband on the dresser?" "Yes, it was taken on their wedding day," Janice said with nostalgic sadness. "I was in her room feeding her lunch when the picture suddenly fell forward and broke the glass," April said. "I almost jumped out of my skin." "Maybe there was a draft," Janice suggested, feeling a chill. "No, all the windows were closed and no fans were running," April replied. "That's odd," Janice said. She remembered Helen saying the same thing had happened at her house the day before the accident. Helen had slipped into a coma and recovered but was left a quadriplegic. She often complained about things moving in her room, but I thought it was the staff while cleaning. "The strangest thing was Helen's reaction," April continued. "Oh?" asked Janice. She just smiled and said, "He's still mad at me." "Does that make sense to you?" April asked oddly. "Oddly enough, it does," Janice replied with a sad smile. "I'll tell you about it someday." "I look forward to it," April said. "I have to make my rounds, but the front desk wants to talk to you about her benefits before you leave." "I'll talk to you later," Janice said. She reached her sister's room and saw the frail, 71-year-old woman in her wheelchair staring out the window. She remembered the accident as if it were yesterday. Helen was on her way to the lake house when she was hit by an 18-wheeler, then another truck. Helen had apparently fallen asleep at the wheel and run a red light. Officers said Helen had to be extracted using the jaws of life and narrowly avoided drowning as water filled the cab. Janice and Richard blamed themselves for not driving her to the cabin. The police report cleared the trucking company of fault. Helen's law firm's health plan covered her hospital expenses, but not all long-term care costs. Janice, with power of attorney, used Helen's funds, including her 401k, Terry's 401k, and the insurance from Terry's firm. Janice also sold Helen's home, using most of the proceeds for medical expenses, now covered by Medicare. Helen still had out-of-pocket costs. Medical expenses over 25 years had nearly depleted her funds, and Janice feared Helen might need to move to a less comfortable nursing home. "Look what I brought you," Janice said, pulling a new Afghan from a large bag. "I just finished it yesterday." "It's so cute," Helen squeaked. "Thank you." "I thought it would keep you warm at night," Janice said with a smile. "I'm sure it will," Helen said, looking out the window. "Can you keep a secret?" she asked. "Of course," Janice replied. "That weekend I spent with Ray. I haven't told Terry yet, but I've realized it wasn't worth the cost," Helen said as a tear rolled down her face. The room's temperature dropped, and the hospital bed rattled quietly. Janice looked fearfully at the bed, then back at her sister. "I think he already knows, dear," Janice said quietly.